Welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Thursday, July 25th, 2019. Hard to believe that we are already almost through the month of July and heading into August. So summer, once quoted by Jim Morrison, is almost gone, folks. And let's get started with tonight's show with some space weather news. Solar wind speed sitting at 358.3 kilometers per second with a density of 3.2. Sunspot number 11. Actually, this is old data. I apologize on that. We are 2 days in a row without sunspots right now. That's sunspot 0 at the time being for 134 days without sunspots in 2019. And the TCI kind of leveling out a little bit at the 2.84, but not going up too much further from that, as we've watched it over the past several days between 2.76 and 2.84. And let's go ahead and check out our space weather section here on the grandsolarminimum.com. Nothing to talk about as far as solar flares, X-ray flux, proton flux, KP indices are sitting at a 1. We've had it as low as 0 at times. And let's take a look at the SDO, and a little bit of rock and roll in here by the SDO. It does its every now and again adjustment, barrel roll, should we say. There's the coronal hole that we talked about a couple of days ago. And let's bring out my favorite, the handy dandy arrow. All right, so this was the coronal hole that we were talking about a few shows back that we saw on the far end of the eastern limb when we checked out the reverse side of our star a few days ago. And so far it's holding steady at the equatorial region, decent size, nothing majorly huge. I'd have to say if this continues to stay where it's at, the effects from this should be pretty minor G1 activity possible. Also looking at solar wind speeds, probably kicking it up a bit, about upper 500s possible at the most. Other than that, though, we don't have a lot to report on from our sun. No sunspots, no CMEs, some weak corona, some very bright region coming in over the eastern limb, but that is not sunspot activity at this time. And let's take a look into our crystal ball here. As we look at the eastern limb, there's that coronal hole. There's another one behind that before the eastern limb. So possibility of 2 geomagnetic storms within 10 days apart is very likely from this next upcoming coronal hole. The other one that is just beyond the eastern limb as we speak appears to be a little bit bigger, and it has a little bit longer stretch from northern hemisphere to southern hemisphere. So we'll keep an eye on that. We might be just getting an appetizer with this first coronal hole that we have to deal with. And there is another one that could be forming on the horizon just behind the eastern limb. And let's go ahead and take a look at our TSI reading for July 15th. Is that what that says? Yeah, July 16th, coming in at 1360.674. Last time we did a broadcast and showed the TSI, we were sitting at the 1360.62 region. So again, we don't see a lot of decrease from TSI. That's pretty normal. And if we have to follow graphs and cycles, just by looking at the previous information right here, it would appear that we are getting ready to go into a bit of an uptick in TSI according to this pattern. So we will have to wait and see. But again, TSI is very, very, very little change. Just about every time we report it, it's very rare that we see a huge dip in TSI at one period in time. All right, so let's get started with tonight's articles that we are presenting to you tonight. Here's the first few from Watchers.news. As always, an unusually strong cold front for the time of year to hit much of the southern United States on July 24th and the 25th, bringing record low July temperatures to numerous cities throughout the region. Lower temperatures will continue across the region through the rest of the week. And we definitely have felt it here in upstate New York. Now, interesting enough, when you look at this map here, the part of the state that I live in is actually in the light blue. But it is definitely refreshing nonetheless. Low temperatures have been in the low 50s, and it's almost where you can't sleep with the window open at night. So it's kind of nice, but definitely a touch of fall for some of us out there in the Northeast. But for this time of year, for temperatures to be like this, numerous cities experienced record low temperatures on the 24th of July, including a 58-degree low in Altus, Oklahoma. Decatur, Alabama, and Salina, Kansas hit 61 degrees Fahrenheit. And I can tell you right now, folks, I've been out in Kansas, in that part where Salina is in western Kansas. 61 degrees in the morning is quite impressive. At that time of year, your normal temperature in the morning out there is 70 to 75 degrees. This time of year is not unheard of to see temperatures in the 110s. That's real surface temperatures, by the way. Again, we're talking about a dry heat out here, but still, very, very low temperature in the morning for this time of year especially. July 25th brought record low temperatures, 59 degrees in San Angelo, Texas, breaking a previous record of 60 degrees Fahrenheit. 58 degrees in Austin, breaking its previous record of 67. So they shattered their record. 2000, which it's, 17, here we go, 9 degrees. I can't add 11 degrees difference. Sorry, folks. That's a lot. In the last 19 years, 11 degrees. Some of these records are being broke by just a degree or half a degree. 60 degrees in Little Rock, Arkansas, breaking its previous record of 61, so not that big of a deal. But we are seeing a trend here. There was some records set in 2000, almost 19 years ago, which, by the way, I want to mention just because it's fresh on my mind with this 19-year cycle, 18-year cycle as well. Talking about there's a strong lunar cycle that's also happening at this moment in time, which also happens to correlate with cooling on the planet. So many things are happening with our planet right now. There's so many different ingredients to throw into the pot when we're talking about climate. It's not just one. I mean, we all know that the sun drives the climate. I mean, that's the number one driver of everything. And then you throw in all these cycles, and it's just amazing. The more we read about this topic, the more we learn, the more we find out all these cycles that correlate into the same thing. It's crazy. That's all. Just a lot of cycles intermixing with each other. Waco, Texas, 60 degrees. Previous record was back in 1911 with a 65-degree low. Now, I've seen a lot of comments out there for folks who, listen to this. Look at this. Coleman came in at 57 degrees. That's in Alabama, guys. 56 degrees in Fort Payne. Black Creek came in at 57. Cool morning. Indeed. But no, I've seen a lot of comments in the talking about Texas, how much cooler it is this year. Yeah, it's gotten hot a few times, but it is not the normal Texas summer so far. Which, that's been pretty much everywhere in the United States. There's no real part of the United States that's been extreme hot all summer. We're starting to see some heat in the Central Plains, but we'll get into that here in a bit. Europe's had a couple of heat waves, but not lasting that long. Heat waves back in the day, we've discussed this before, 8, 9, 10, 11 days. That's a real heat wave. 3 is the criteria. 90 degrees or higher, considered a heat wave. And this last one that we had here in the U.S., they didn't even talk about actual temps. They were talking about heat indexes, the real feel. So overhyped is one thing. I mean, we really stretched it with this heat wave talk here in the U.S. last week. But refreshing weather right now, low records being broken in July. Okay, so explain to me something, Noah, and others who claim that June was one of the warmest on record, and how July is hot. Why are we breaking low temperature records in the end of July? We are approaching the dog days of summer, and we're breaking low temperature records in Texas, guys. I'm not bragging about Ohio hitting 51 degrees or upstate New York hitting 50 degrees. I'm not bragging about. We're showing you guys temperatures in the deep south, 56 degrees on July 25th. And yet, we continue to hear and see all these gloom and doom headlines about global warming and how man has done it. And boy, I have a good show for you guys tonight too. We'll get into all kinds of things. Mainstream media, let's just say that mainstream is kicking it up a notch, folks, with the global warming nonsense. And they're kicking it up from the 12-year mark to now 18 months to live or to get climate change under control. But again, got a good show lined up for you guys. Thank you, Watchers.news, for covering this cold weather outbreak here. And yeah, it's cold. Texas, parts of Texas in the low 60s, upper 50s, July 25th. I wanted to cover this too. Again, these are not usually my forte, fireballs and meteors. I'm not fascinated by them, but they're in the news a lot. A bright fireball streaked through the night sky over the East Coast. The last show we did, we talked about one, I believe it was Ontario or Ottawa? I don't remember exactly where, but it was Canada. I do apologize here for memory failing me, but the AMS received 256 eyewitnesses reports from Connecticut, Delaware, Massachusetts, Maryland, Maine, North Carolina, New Jersey, New York, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Virginia, and Vermont. According to the AMS, and the eyewitness says it lit up the whole beach. One eyewitness said, "We could otherwise see many stars, but the moon was not visible tonight, so it was generally dark out." And just reports all over for meteors, asteroids flying by, close by. But this is almost like a very, very frequent thing we are seeing on Watchers.news. I've noticed here lately that there's been an uptick in reporting on these near-Earth objects passing by, and now we're getting some reports here in on the East Coast. Interesting enough, Mari, some of these reports came out close to the definitely in the capital region near Lake George, and just very light though. So if you lived on the East Coast, very strong sightings. If you lived further inland towards Syracuse or Albany, very light reports of witnessing this in your sky, but still impressive that that many people were still witnessing this. So thanks again to Watchers.news. But here's another volcano activity, guys. An active lava lake at Shishaldin Volcano, aviation color code orange in Alaska. And this happened on July 24th. The last eruption of this volcano took place in 2015 as a VEI-1. Field crews reported an active lava lake and minor spattering within the summit crater during a helicopter overflight. Elevated seismic activity continues similar to past few weeks, along with consistent elevated surface temperatures and satellite images. No lava or ash has erupted outside the summit of the crater at this time. The volcano has a history of a VEI 1 to 3 eruptions dating back to 1824. AVO raised the aviation color code to yellow and the alert level to advisory on July 12th, 2019 due to increased seismicity accompanied by elevated surface temperatures at the summit. So just to report another volcano, this is probably number 4 in the last 2 weeks that we have seen an alert level being raised, and temperatures, I mean, you could clearly see the lava lake right there. So this volcano has a history, and it, the last time it blew was actually coming out of a solar max as we were declining out of the peak of a solar max. So this blew last time in 2015 as a VEI-1. Interesting to see what's happening right now. Again, no one's saying this is getting ready to blow or it's going to be a big one or anything like that. Just another report, though, of another alert system being raised here on a volcano. And this is probably, I think, the 3rd update we've given on this, and Watchers continues to update the story, so we will continue to report on this as well. But now, last time we reported, we were talking about 300 people. That death toll has now jumped up to more than 650 people were killed since the onset of the annual monsoon across India, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. Heavy rainfall and resulting floods affected more than 10 million people and forced tens of thousands to evacuate. Officials report that at least over 660 deaths in Bihar, Assam, Maharashtra, and Uttar Pradesh alone. Heavy rainfall and floods are now expected in Kerala, Karnataka, West Bengal, and the Himalayan scheme states. Neighboring Nepal reported at least 94 deaths and 29 people still missing. Bangladesh has 97 deaths due to drowning and lightning strikes, with a third of the country submerged right now. At least 30 people have been killed in Pakistan, and there is lots of video footage here. Every time I play one of the videos, when I show, especially in this region, it seems to affect this channel. So we'll leave the link here at the website. And once again, thanks to watchers.news for the update on this continuing. Again, this is part of their monsoon season, but they are getting hit hard right now. Rare tornado touches down Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Now, this happened on July 24th, which was Tuesday. This is when this was reported, but the actual tornado hit on Monday, July 23rd, causing widespread destruction in the popular tourist vacation town. Of the 1,253 tornadoes that the U.S. has on an average year, Massachusetts only sees one. Alaska and Rhode Island see 0. So they just wanted to throw how rare this actually was. Yeah, this was rare. According to the National Weather Service, the damage from the tornado began in Yarmouth and ended in Harwich on Cape Cod. The damage on the Cape was caused by both a tornado and straight-line wind damage. Here's some footage here from an official news channel here. Wow. Now that is straight-line damage right there, folks. This wind just comes in with full force. That's it. Wow. Impressive footage. Again, folks, please make sure you are safe if you are going to film. I think this is probably another angle of this roof being blown off of this apartment building. And at this time, it appears it was just straight line winds that just took it. And a big gust just came down. And maybe this place didn't lose their roof. Again, very rare that this area receives this kind of wind damage. Again, tornadoes don't usually happen here. Trees down everywhere. The greatest amount of damage appears to have occurred in the town of Harwich. The tornado itself touched down in Yarmouth and then touched down again in Harwich with pockets of EF1 damage in both locations. There was extensive tree and power line damage, the National Weather Service had said. Most of the town of Harwich lost power due to the storm. The maximum wind speed for the tornado was 110 miles an hour, which equates a strong EF1 tornado. Once again, thank you, Teo, for your continuous work here at watchers.news. A lot is going on worldwide. It's hard to keep up with everything, and these guys do a great job over there. All right, guys, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this short break. Stay tuned.
Do you like this show? Give us a thumbs up. Want to support us more? Share to your favorite social media platform. Buy a t-shirt or become a Patreon. All links are in the description below.
All right, we're back. Let's go into some climate news, folks. First, we'll start with an article over at What's Up With That. I had a little time to review this before tonight's program, of course. And this is just another article I wanted to use as kind of my point of setup here. First of all, U.S. media conceal 4.5 billion tons increase of CO2 by developing nations push meaningless sustainability propaganda agenda. Now, as I'm reading this, China and India account for over 67% of developing nations' CO2 emissions growth through the use of increased fossil fuel, predominantly coal fuel, where China and India accounted for about 88% of developing nations' increased coal use during the decade. And by the way, Larry, you write some very winded sentences, so thank you for that. So the United States decreased its emissions by 530 million metric tons. Okay, which makes sense to me now. Developing nations are building more CO2 emissions when you're building. I think we covered this on a previous program as well. And then when you have a nation that's established, like the United States of America, sure, we add to our economy and our infrastructure, but for the most part, we have a pretty solid foundation for the most part. Not everywhere is perfect or great. So from what I'm reading here, developing nations' increased CO2 emissions were over 8.5 times greater than the size of the significant U.S. reduction. China is continuing to increase coal use with plans to build hundreds of new coal plants in the coming decade. Oh, and I wanted to mention too, the reason why the United States dropped as far as their emissions in CO2, it's because of natural gas and how clean it is. The emissions from natural gas compared to coal are drastically lower, and it's affordable. But people in the other side of the aisle there, AOC and the others, they want to change the economy to ban natural gas and ban coal. Now, we have to be responsible with our breathing air, our drinking water. We need to be burning fossil fuels at a responsible rate. I agree 100%. I don't believe it has any effect on the climate whatsoever, and the effect that it does have is so small that it really has nothing to do with forecasting anything. The impacts are minor. My concern is that we do have a clean way of keeping everyone with electricity and heat. It's natural gas. And no one is getting upset, especially here in New York. People are getting letters saying that some commercial companies may be refused service now in the near future. This is in motion. In the next 3 years, they are moving to ban natural gas here in New York and coal. But when you look and see that India and China have increased their CO2 emissions, and remember, just because they are emitting 88% of the world's emission doesn't mean that there's a lot more CO2 in the atmosphere. That just means their emissions are 88% of the 0.004% of CO2 in the atmosphere. Keep that in mind, folks. Remember the whole example of the atmosphere being 78% nitrogen and 21% oxygen and 0.004% CO2, natural and man. And the TV show host poured out a bag of rice into a bowl, pulled out 1 grain of rice, and said, "This is the amount of carbon emitted by man in Australia," and compared it to the entire bowl of rice. I mean, you can't get any more transparent than that. And that example is not exaggerated. Anyway, different topic, different show. But the reason why the U.S. dropped in CO2 emissions was not because they're adopting green policy. It's because there was a lot more natural gas used. And I know that was a fact here in New York this year, that there was more natural gas being dispersed this year than there was coal. China and India, they continue to burn coal, lots of it, less natural gas. Therefore, they're emitting 88% of the world's CO2 emissions. That's very believable, by the way. So, as you guys read on, this is a great article talking about energy Again, the writer here has lots of good points to bring up. But the main thing to stay focused on here, folks, is that he's right. There is a propaganda war. I'll just read the bottom half of this article here. The climate alarmist propaganda war to fabricate government entities that would control global energy use and emissions has failed. The world's developing nations have taken control of their own energy and emissions destiny, and as such have taken control of the world's energy use and emissions outcomes because of their complete dominance in these global measures. End sentence. They have achieved this result without giving up their autonomy and decision-making authority to illegitimate global government political schemers. In other words, China and India are doing what they got to do to make their country go round. Either they are paying attention to what scientists are telling them there, and they know that coal and CO2 is not the reason why the climate's a mess, and that's why they continue to increase the use of coal, possibly. I can't imagine that the Chinese government and Indian government are just hard-headed and don't care, especially when you look at how much CO2 that this report is claiming they emit into the atmosphere, pretty much almost all of it. And I know a lot of you folks out there, though, that can't be true. United States are. I know. Industrialized as hell over here. I get it. I'm only the messenger. I'm reporting this article. I feel like that there is a lot of truth to it, and he gives examples here as well. But the main story here is the reason, and this article is talking about something else, but I wanted to point this out because the one way that the U.S. has dropped CO2 emissions was because of how clean natural gas really is. Point blank. And how cheap it is. Compared to what solar and wind and hydro and nuclear is going to be, considering that that's only 17% of our energy supply right now. The other 83% comes from natural gas and coal and oil. Also, all right, 12 years to save the planet, eh? I'm going to read a little bit of this. You remember the good old days when we had 12 years to save the planet? Now it seems there's a growing consensus that the next 18 months will be critical in dealing with the global heating crisis, among other environmental challenges. Last year, the IPCC reported that to keep the rise in global temperatures below 1.5 this century, emissions of carbon dioxide would have to be cut by 45% by 2030. But today, observers recognize that decisive political steps to enable cuts in carbon to take place will have to happen before the end of next year. The idea that 2020 is a firm deadline, what I wanted to bring up too, by the way, is how much rides on what the IPCC says. So why are the next 18 months so important? The principal is looking ahead a series of critical UN meetings that are due to take place between now and the end of 2020. Ever since a global climate agreement was signed in Paris in December 2015, negotiators have been consumed with arguing about rulebook for the pact. But under the terms of the deal, countries have also promised to improve their carbon cutting plans by the end of next year. One of the understated headlines in last year's IPCC report was that global emissions of carbon dioxide must peak by 2020 to keep planet below the 1.5. Current plans are nowhere near strong enough to keep temperatures below that so-called safe limit. Right now, we are heading towards a 3 degrees Celsius heating by 2100, not 1.5. As countries usually scope out their plans over 5-10-year time frames, if the 45% carbon cut targeted by 2030 is to be met, the plans really need to be on the table by the end of 2020. Back to the IPCC, though. Jumping up and down about climate alarmism here. The IPCC when asked about solar physics being applied to climate, the IPCC, which is trusted worldwide, supposedly, told that the consensus was that the sun does not play a large enough role and does not have an impact on the climate. And here it's NOAA, www.swpc.noaa.gov, impact space weather impacts climate. It reads here, all weather on Earth from the surface of the planet out into space begins with the sun. Space weather and terrestrial weather, the weather we feel on the surface, are influenced by the small changes the sun undergoes during its solar cycle. Folks, remember, it says small changes affect the climate here on Earth. And the unfortunate part here, and this is buried deep on NOAA, and this is not like on the front page, the duration of solar minimum may also have an impact on Earth's climate. During solar minimum, there is a maximum amount of cosmic rays, high energy particles, whose source is outside our solar system, reaching the Earth. There is a theory that cosmic rays can create nucleation sites in the atmosphere, which see cloud formation and create cloudier conditions. It states right here on NOAA, if this were true, then there would be a significant impact on climate, which would be modulated by the 11-year solar cycle. The reason why I'm bringing this article up again, we mentioned it a couple weeks ago, back when Zarkova's paper was released, because I just wanted to put a refresher out there to folks who haven't seen this yet. The IPCC, though, is supposed to be trusted. NOAA is supposed to be working on the same page with them on global warming and how the humans are doing this. But buried deep on their website is this little paragraph. The very beginning of it and the very end of it basically confirms what we are showing you folks here at the Grand Solar Minimum, that space weather impacts climate, cooling and warming. And it's all about the sun. But yet the IPCC claims that the sun does not play a major role or even a minor role. And there's no reason to research the sun any further. That is the IPCC stance. I just think it's important that I wanted to throw out here because so many people are banking on the IPCC as being, the whole thing. Everybody's got to listen to what they're saying over here. Yet they don't include the effects from our solar cycles. And NOAA, even NOAA, and you guys know how we are with NOAA. I mean, I'm blocked from NOAA's .gov Facebook page. Every time I ask a question about solar cycles, they get pissed off and they block me. Or they warn me to block me. Hey, we're not going to have this discussion here. And it's funny because I've been noticing too, whenever I comment on NOAA or severeweather.eu, it's like they don't respond to anybody else but the ones who question if it's warming or not. And I find it interesting that those people seem to get a little bit more pushback versus the other folks who actually buy into the whole man is changing the climate and it's global warming and not global cooling. And all I gotta say, folks, is, all we have to do is sit and wait. In the next couple of years, we're gonna know. We're definitely gonna know by this winter. And honestly, I thought people would be a little more convinced about this past winter going into spring and into the summer. And still, a lot of doubt about what some folks like Zarkova and ourselves are talking about. But I've noticed this week, they really, the mainstream has done a hell of a job at trying to debunk any type of cooling with stupid, like this right here, studies. This is from Climate Depot. They put together about 3 or 4 articles. This is the one I wanted to show you guys. But this article is like, basically, little ice age. It was just, regions. It wasn't every, pair studies published Wednesday provide stark evidence that the rise in global temperatures over the past 150 years have been far more rapid and widespread than any warming period in the past 2,000 years. Okay, so what's wrong with that statement? Well, I'm going to show you real quick.
This is Tony.
Hold on, Tony. So Tony does a really good job. I'm going to pause this real quick. Take this out of the way. Make this bigger. All right, hopefully that's not too overwhelming here. But what I want to show you is this little graph right here.
That's not going to work, Jake.
All right. So I'll go ahead and lower it. Just have to deal with it like this, guys. I'll just zoom in.
Can I maybe...
No, that's all right. I got it.
There you go.
Yeah.
You got it.
So basically, the last 2,000 years, according to this study, they are now telling us that the medieval warm period hasn't happened. That it doesn't exist. Here we are right now, guys. This is the current warming of our planet over the past 150 years. That is what they're telling you that is so unprecedented. But what about this? What about this? This is back in 1200, 1300. Okay. There was no paper mill or SUVs or man-made CO2 or anything like that going on. In fact, this was a very warm period of time. And I'll tell you, I'll actually play a little bit of Tony's video here, guys, because he has some pretty good points here in the very beginning. I'm not going to play the whole thing, just the first few seconds of it here. Let's go ahead and start it off.
In the journal Nature have found there is no evidence for globally coherent warm and cold periods over the last 2,000 years prior to industrialization. That's significant because climate change deniers have sometimes pointed to epochs like the so-called Little Ice Age or Medieval Warm Period to argue that the current global warming is one among multiple similar global climate events. So what the article is saying is that only climate deniers believe in the Medieval Warm Period and the Little Ice Age. Now let's look at who some of these climate deniers are. Well, this is the 1990 IPCC report. And there it is, the medieval warm period, much warmer than the present, with the Little Ice Age in between.
Okay, so that's my point right there. So the IPCC in 1990, this report recognizes the medieval warm period. He's going to show you another example.
The world's leading climate scientists all agreed 30 years ago that there was a medieval warm period and Little Ice Age. And these are the people who are now being called climate deniers. And here's a 1981 article from James Hansen, the world's #1 climate alarmist, once again showing a medieval warm period, a Little Ice Age, and current temperatures lower than the medieval warm period. So now we know he's just a climate denier. One of the favorite tactics of climate alarmists to try to get rid of the medieval warm period is to claim that it only occurred in England. But that simply isn't true. This is from 1975 in the New York Times. The isotopes also reflect the long-term climate changes. A remarkable finding reported in the May 1st issue of Nature is that trends in Greenland for the period 850 to 1700 AD closely match the British record for 1100 to 1950. California tree rings show a climate record similar to the one in Britain.
Okay, so the video will be here at Climate Depot once you guys check on this link. But for those of you out there who accuse people on this side of the fence as climate deniers, there's nothing we're denying about climate. In fact, we're looking at the science. And this shows you the proof right here that we're basing this information off science. The tree rings. These guys are not just pulling these numbers and findings out of nowhere like the global warming community does. This is scientifically proven, dating back in tree rings and ice cores and other sediments that you can get in the ocean floors. They're comparing and lining things up. The biggest point Tony points out is that 30 years ago, the IPCC and others believed in the medieval warm period, and now They're trying to make it disappear. And how are they doing that? Here is that propaganda. This goes back to the article I was talking to you guys about here a minute ago. This gentleman here, Larry Hamlin, about the propaganda agenda. Here it is. This is it. The NBC climate, their headline says it all. Climate scientists drive stake through the heart of skeptics' arguments. And then they want to come out and say things like, new research shows that recent rise in global temperatures is unlike anything seen in the past 2,000 years. Propaganda. We just showed you the medieval warming period. We just showed you 30 years ago when others like IPCC believed in it as well. Back then, they acknowledged it. Now this article here from NBC News is trying to erase the medieval warm period, just like that is mentioned in Tony's video as well. More than 700 scientists from 400 institutions in 40 countries have contributed peer-reviewed papers providing evidence of the medieval warm period was real and global warming and is warmer than the present, which obviously you can see that in the graph. Antarctica was warmer 1,000 years ago and life was okay. This is my favorite graph. Look at the medieval warming period. Here it is. Yes, they're acknowledging Antarctica is warmer than usual, but look at how much warmer it was back here. And did we have a climate catastrophe emergency? Was there an extinction of man during this time? So while the mainstream media wants to hide this from you guys, the data on record of old is still here. You could still find this stuff. This isn't tampered with. This is real-time stuff. And you can't tell me that the warming that's happening right now, which is where my arrow is pointing, is unlike anything they've ever seen since back here. He's saying the past 2,000 years, folks, which means all the way back here to the very end. He's saying this is bigger than this. Clearly, we can all see the difference. But we are in a battle right now. It is definitely a climate war. Just because of people who are getting papers published in a peer-reviewed journal doesn't mean it is the law anymore. That's being questioned as well, unfortunately. But we're here to catch it. And I'm telling you, folks, anybody who wants to talk about that the medieval warm period didn't happen, well, direct them to this video. This link to this actual page will be on our website, so they can go to these articles, read for themselves, and also check out the evidence, like the more than 700 scientists from 400 institutions and 40 countries. And like always, here are all the links to the papers that make what they're saying truth. I mean, scientific paper after scientific paper after scientific paper after scientific paper that's peer-reviewed. That's the proof that the folks on the solar cycle side of things has for you. And what does the proof of the guy that invented the internet, I don't even want to say his name anymore, what's his proof besides his bold predictions of no ice caps by 2013? Does he have a website that provides us scientific papers that show us that humans are causing the warming? Mari gave an answer to a gentleman who was trying to, say that CO2. Actually, Mari, could you come over here and commentate this real quick? I wanted to share with how you shared the NOAA article, and the guy told you that it was just a blog, the information about how the sun drives the climate. How did that end up for him? This was good.
Well,
yesterday, I get my head in things, and then I find some things and I get triggered. I'm guilty of being triggered. So yesterday I tweeted to the president. I put, do you know, Donald Trump, not one of the IPCC published reports contain any reports from solar physicists. How can an establishment such as the IPCC not factor in our star or consult solar physicists with the sun's impact on our climate? How careless. So, this guy, and it's interesting how the trolls come out seconds after it's posted. It's crazy. And he goes back and forth with me. You can see it on Twitter. And I send him the screenshot of Noah. Did you show it, Jake?
I did.
Noah, I sent the screenshot of not that, but the actual site with the blurb at the bottom that says the sun is the primary driver of the climate. So my point is, why isn't there solar physicists?
We've crashed the site.
Have we? So I did a screenshot, just this blurb.
Mari just shared this right here. She didn't show the official NOAA part. And the guy's response was classic.
Don't share no blogs. Give me, why don't you share something a little bit more official? Send me a peer-reviewed paper. No, I said, well, first off, that was NOAA, numbnuts. And here's your peer-reviewed paper. And I slapped down from nature.com Valentina's Zarkova's latest paper. And it's funny how these alarmists spin. It's like they spin wheels. They run in circles, acting like babies, saying, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And you keep on asking them for proof. And it's like they can't come up with proper data. All I asked was, please show me a report from the IPCC that uses solar physicists. They can't. It doesn't exist. Am I done? Maybe.
Good grief.
Maybe not.
You are terrifying.
I know.
I mean, all she had to do was just say, I got this from Noah. But Noah, let's throw a little numbnuts in there at him, I guess. Hey, we got to smack them around. They smack us around. So, Mari. But like I said, guys, we're in a climate war right now. Where this is worse than the politics that's happening right around us. And that's another distraction. Everybody watching the Mueller report and ignoring the real problem, which is we need to figure out new solutions on how to deal with the impacts of what is happening with our climate. But again, thank you to Climate Depot, Mark Morano and folks, putting this all together for us. And like I said, we have proof. We can show you, these links and papers are found on these cooling blogs, but at least we have links to actual peer-reviewed studies that prove what we're saying and not just making up hypothetical, scare tactical things to get people to go into action and try to, just scare people into buying their claims. I do recommend watching Tony Heller's video, this testimony here from this person who back in 1990, I think it was trying to warn our government that people are trying to make the medieval warm period disappear from record. Why is that? Because it's inconvenient to what they're saying now. What they're saying now does not jive with what happened during the medieval warm period because that was all natural. And what we're experiencing now is supposed to be the worst warming ever, which that's not true either. So, great video. Thank you, Mark Morano and folks over there at Climate Depot. Guys, don't go anywhere as we gaze at the work of David Birch. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Do you like this show? Give us a thumbs up. Want to support us more? Share to your favorite social media platform. Buy a t-shirt or become a Patreon. All links are in the description below.
And we're back, folks, for the weather part. Just an article from weather.com. Warning here, Lake Erie Beach in Ohio closes down. Yeah, sorry about that, Weather Channel.
Well, Lake Erie Beach in Huron, Ohio has been shut down after a second swimmer went missing in less than a month. And this was on Sunday, okay? Now, officials are blaming strong wind and high water levels at the lake, creating dangerous swimming conditions. And that makes a lot of sense, guys, because all of these Great Lakes, they've been running high because of all the snow melt. There was a lot of snow that fell, especially in the northern part of the country during the winter. That melted down. That made the water levels high. And then we've also had a pretty wet spring.
Okay. So living in Buffalo, I can tell you something. And Mari and I, we have footage somewhere. I know we have. I actually have it saved in my iCloud, so I know I have it on my phone. We witnessed a event that I've never witnessed before because I don't live near the Great Lakes. Mari might have before, but this one was very odd. We knew there was some weather happening at Lake Erie in Buffalo, near Buffalo. We drove out to a site, and when we pulled up to where we could get a good view of Lake Erie, you would have thought you were looking at the raging seas of the Atlantic Ocean and the North Atlantic. The sun was out, gray dark clouds everywhere, the wind picks up, and it was blizzard-like conditions for 13 minutes. The problem was it was only 42 degrees outside, and we were seeing snowfall, and it was sticking to the trees and the grass. Of course, the surfaces, concrete, it was not sticking around to. I can't remember exactly what month. I'm pretty sure this was closer to spring, though. This was away from the winter months. But from the snow melt and the rain that we got starting last year, and remember, we had the ice jam floods in Buffalo. I mean, it was a mess, 2018 in Western New York. And I'm sure it was this year as well. But that was when we started to see Lake Erie's lakes starting to get a little bit higher, and wave actions were incredible. So to see this report and to hear the Weather Channel guy here talk about how the snow melt and the floods and how this is all contributed, again, this is truth and more proof about the Great Lakes area. Could be a bigger issue than we know at this point, especially around these shorelines as far as flooding goes. I've witnessed the ice chunks on Lake Erie when that was during the same day, wasn't it? When we had the high. So we had the high winds, the ice chunks moving up on shore as if it was a tsunami, and then the snowfall. It was just a crazy weather event. So I wanted to mention this unfortunate situation where people lost their lives, but also to kind of shed light that we do need to be more aware of our Great Lakes just because of level rise, because of all the snow melt and rain, the floods. And I can only imagine how much more interesting this area will become as far as topic goes. Now, I don't expect any crazy lake effect snows for the coming fall because I don't think, I'll have to double check on the temperatures, but right now I don't think they're breaking any records when it comes to lake temperatures. And usually to get those really big lake effect snowfalls, you have to have some pretty warm waters and then all of a sudden a sudden rush of Arctic air pushing over the lakes that creates these snowmakers. And I'm telling you, Mari could attest to the 8-footer that she was involved in back in 2014. And I remember that snowstorm. I remember getting ready for work, shaking my head like, wow, 8 feet in 48 hours. So pointing that out, watching Lake Erie in Ohio, New York, Pennsylvania area, especially this winter. Interesting to see how things shape out. Here's a look at our current satellite. Guys, kind of quiet in the weather world right now, which is good. We could use the break. All over the world we could use the break. But here in the U.S., we're not talking about anything in the tropics. There was a possible development area in the Gulf that quickly faded out. There was this other storm that we were kind of watching out there by Florida that had a 20% chance, and I don't think that's of any interest anymore. I don't know if, looking at this latest satellite edition, it's just nothing's getting organized out here. And I think the watch is off as far as any kind of major hurricanes or anything like that, any development whatsoever. But definitely have to keep watch. Yeah, right now NOAA is saying no threats whatsoever in the Atlantic or the Gulf. Very minimal watches out there right now and alerts. Again, this has been a very active season, and the month of July, since the mid-month, has kind of quieted down a little bit. And like I said, we need it. We got some shower activity in Iowa, across the Four Corners region, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, and the Sierras near California. Some light rain as well in southern Florida. Some heavier showers actually towards Orlando. Other than that, guys, really not a whole lot happening. And like I said, we need all the dry weather we can get. Moving into this weekend, the same regions that we need the dry weather for the farming is going to stay dry through the weekend. The Northeast and the Great Lakes may see some shower activity as this high pressure system is fighting to stay inland to keep that moisture out of Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, Illinois, Missouri, Arkansas. Guys, it's biting at some time. Now, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Minnesota sees a decent shot for rain not until June 29th. That's next Monday. Moving out a little bit further than that, we get a better widespread chance of rain through the Midwest, into Ohio Valley, into the Northeast by the end of the month, July 31st. And heading back into the beginning of August, another high pressure system dropping in from Canada and once again protecting the same areas: Ohio, Indiana, Missouri, Arkansas, Kansas. Got a pretty big storm system they're projecting here August 3rd, heading through South Dakota, through Nebraska, into Kansas. We'll watch that as well. But that high pressure system by the 4th of August has no chance of existing, as tons of low pressure is building up, more moisture building in, and it looks like by the 5th of August, we are back to that rainy, widespread pattern throughout the Central Plains and the Northern Plains and the South, the Midwest, the Northeast. Definitely the wet pattern is coming back, according to the GFS anyway. At a time of the year, and look, these storms could be severe, especially right here around the 6th. This low pressure system moving through Nebraska and Kansas, spots of yellow and red moving there. So we could be looking at possibility of severe weather where crops were planted late and are having a hard time maturing in the first place. August 7th, Missouri. There is a region where you guys need to keep an eye out, especially along the Mississippi region, as it looks like we'll have a rain event, multi-day rain event, western Kentucky near the Mississippi River. Also looking at heavy rain. This is the second week of August. And this will take us into near the 10th, the 11th of August. More rain. It's like the atmosphere is reloading up again. So definitely a change in the pattern as we get into August. So if you live in the Midwest, Ohio Valley, Kentucky, Tennessee, the South, Missouri, Arkansas, for the most part, for the rest of July, maybe some scattered showers here and there. And then this is where this high pressure system starts to break down and being pushed off into the Atlantic. A chance of rain on Monday. So basically, next 6-7 days is spotty showers at best. A good chance of moisture on the 29th of July. High pressure fighting to move back in by the end of July. But by the 1st of August, you see that high pressure system pushing these lows off into the sea, trying to establish itself once again. But August 3rd, low pressure systems have other plans in mind. And as you see, we enter back into another wet pattern. So enjoy it while it lasts, folks. The rest of this week, for the most part, if you're into weather and storms, this is going to be a boring 8 to 10 days. But for you farmers out there in Nebraska and Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, Indiana, Illinois, parts of Ohio, Tennessee, Kentucky, where you need this dry weather, you're going to get a little bit more favorable weather as far as that goes. There are a couple of storms to watch across Nebraska and Kansas from August 3rd and then into the second week of August as well. Couple systems move through and possibly causing more flooding to areas that might be starting to dry out and get a grip on reality again, only to see a possibility of more inundating rain. Let's take a look at our temperatures coming up here towards the end of July. Nice little summer pattern here we got going for most of the United States. Highs in the 80s and 70s across the Midwest, but the 90s really are staying to the southwest. Texas, the deep south, Florida might have some upper 80s. Look at these temperatures, July 29th. Parts of Indiana, 69 degrees in Detroit for the high. Sharper, cooler air moving into Minnesota. Look at that, 48 degrees for overnight lows in northern Minnesota, don't you know? 55 and 54 degrees, so we might see some more records broken the end of July even, possibly, folks, in the northern plains. As we move into August, Texas and Oklahoma, it's going to get hot for you. Dog days of summer are definitely prevalent here in the south. But look at these temperatures. August 1st, 70s. Dog days, usually in the mid-80s at this point for most of these states. Kentucky, Tennessee, Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, Arkansas. Kansas, 82 degrees for August 1st. In parts of western Kansas. This time of the year, it's in the hundreds. Easily. Cooler temperatures still sticking around the Midwest and the Northeast, August 2nd. Heating up a little bit in Kansas into the 90s by the 2nd, the 3rd. And then, that's where that storm system's moving through. That one we need to watch from Nebraska into Kansas. It looks pretty intense right now. Look at the temperature drop from that. 68 degrees. The surrounding areas are only getting in the mid-70s, maybe the upper 70s, low 80s. Meanwhile, spotty heat across the east and the northeast. Heating up along the coast, though. And there's that little mini heat wave again in the beginning of August. But boy, not impressed so far with the dog days of summer. Look at that, August 6th. Whew. August 7th, these are overnight lows. Let's not be misleading. These are still low temperatures, but this looks like fall. I hate to be that guy. This looks like fall. Or the beginning of September, not the beginning of August. These are daytime highs. Look at this. August 7th, the daytime high temperatures for August 7th in northern Ohio near Toledo, 71 degrees. 70 degrees along the Ohio River in Cincinnati. 68 degrees near Chicago for a high. 68 in Detroit. 64 degrees for the daytime high in Syracuse, New York. Thor, out there in Maine, look out, fella. 57 in the northern part of your state. August 7th. This is what the agriculture world is fretting, are these cooler temperatures. The crops need all the heat they can get right now. And it's almost like the heat's evacuating the areas that need it the most. August 8th, mid-70s high in the Nebraska area. Kansas, again, low 70s across the Kentucky, Tennessee valleys, West Virginia, North Carolina. There's parts that's going to be high of 65. I wonder if there's something wrong with the GFS forecast. I mean, this looks like the beginning of September, folks. Let's be real. Here's August 10th, daytime highs. A lot of yellow and orange in the northeast. A lot of heat in the southwest. That's where it belongs. It's where it lives, especially this time of year. This is as far as it goes out. August 10th. Starting to see a little bit more warmth. But 83, 80 degrees in Toledo, 79 in Cleveland, 82 in Cincinnati, 87 in southern Indiana, 85 Illinois, The heat stays in Oklahoma and South. Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, Louisiana, Arkansas, Texas, Florida. You guys really were the only parts of this country that's seen summer, in my opinion. And even some of you are complaining that it's not the usual summer. So, I didn't get a chance to look at the temperature map today. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I was kind of surprised. The last time I saw this, the temperatures weren't this low. And this is a complete change in just 2 days of what we were getting at forecast. So, let's hope this GFS is wrong. Let's hope that this is so unreliable that, temperatures bounce back nicely and we see the heat that we need in Nebraska and Kansas and Iowa and Missouri and Illinois and Indiana and Ohio. Let's hope that we get the heat and the weather that we need to help these crops. We are now officially racing the clock on that first freeze. And of course, like I said, and a lot of the reason why we're probably seeing cooler temperatures too in the beginning of August, the midway through the first week and into the second week, is because we're getting a lot wetter pattern as well. And we all know moisture keeps it cool. Murray, did you want to come over here and say hello to the chat while we kind of look at some weather maps as we close out for tonight's broadcast?
Yes, Jake. Absolutely. I was just telling people in the chat, the weather, it doesn't seem like we have nice, warm summer nights anymore.
It's been cool. Boy, yeah, it's been cool.
And it's been going on for a few years. It seems, I remember, what was it? Let's see, maybe 3 years ago, I spent almost every night outside during the summer using my telescope, gazing at the moon. And I have not dragged my telescope out, and I don't even remember because it's always so cold outside. I'm a wuss, I guess. I'd like to thank Todd Hathaway. It seems like every time he wanted to chat in the chat, he did a super chat. I'm blown away. Thank you so much. Very humbled. He went to the ICCC Climate Change Conference, and he wants to debrief us.
Ooh.
So I told him we would connect tomorrow and hear that. He said a lot of the presenters sort of hit a dead end with GSM because there really isn't any funding to go with it. And I'm like, well, people don't want to cover a natural cycle. It's not sensational enough that it's something so simple.
But see, I disagree with that statement.
Complex.
And I disagree. Well, I mean, sensational, this natural cycle is more incredible than any imaginable man-made weather event ever imagined, in my opinion. What we're witnessing right now is just the beginning. So if this continues to worsen like we've been telling everyone, like it has happened, I can't imagine what sensationalism won't even exist.
Well, it might not be sensation. Maybe I used the wrong term.
I agree with what you're saying. No, I agree with you. I get what you're saying.
You can't tax mankind.
Right.
For saying, it's not a good money maker.
Right.
Essentially.
No, you're right.
So the funding isn't there because it's not man's fault. They can't say, hey, the sun is changing, it's your fault. So it's not going to be profitable.
I agree.
And that's the sad truth of it. And, you have the climate realists, the global cooling people, the global warming people. I just sit on the fence watching everything in disbelief. Because it seems like the world is just really confused. And to me, it's very clear what's going on. There's no question what's going on. And we break it down pretty decent. It's so complex, it's not easy to do. So, thank you, Todd. We'll connect tomorrow. Let's see. Matt Bros says, fields are soft. You have to watch where you drive equipment. He's been harvesting his wheat. Thor is in Twitter jail because he called out a leftist politician. Sorry to hear that, Thor. And then, let's see, Marco, he had some good news. His grocery stores and Walmart and other local grocery stores are stocked well. No shortage. Everything's on sale and everything's doing good. So that's fascinating. I would just like to use that as Another reminder, if you come across anything weird, send us pictures. We are tracking this. I'm not going to let this go. This is something we have to pay attention to. The fact is, we have had shortages this year based on last year's harvest. And, really, last year's harvest compared to this year is nothing. So I feel like the reporting on this year's crop right now, we're not going to see exactly we're not going to feel it until about this time next year. And right now, like Matt Bros said that the corn was only 2 weeks behind silking. I believe that report actually was only for 2 states. They omitted the other major corn growing states. So what are the actual numbers? To me, when you look up these reports, they're starting to not cover the whole picture and omit things, and that's what's concerning me. Let's see. Zixel said dried hard wheat will store 40 years if vacuum packed or stored in an oxygen-free environment. I didn't realize it would keep that long. That's fascinating. So we have a lot of people sharing interesting things in the chat. Thank you for joining me in the chat. I'm trying to use the GSM social more on our website, so if you have an account, pop in, leave us a message. We are checking it more often now, believe it or not. We both were in there today saying hi to people, right,
It's Jake? A great website, and what we're building here, and we noticed the other day, the days that we seem to mention this on our website, we get a little bit more people who come in and sign up on our website. It's like a Facebook social media website that Mari has put together, and loving it so far. You're doing good stuff over here, Mar.
Well,
that's all I gotta say.
It's a labor of love, this website. It's clearly under construction.
I mean, this is the Facebook of Grand Solar Minimum.
Right now we have things. Oh, look, yep. People are adding profile pictures and stuff. Awesome.
We're seeing more people. I mean, yes, we have 165 members on the page. Not that big, but this is a start. I mean, Facebook started somewhere.
Look at someone shared like that actuary insurance PDF that goes over Grand Solar Minimum stuff. This was something an insurance convention was covering in 2013 about Grand Solar Minimum. I've come across this PDF a few times, and someone from the GSM social group put that in there, so that was pretty cool.
Well, what is the importance of this, guys, is that we're not going to have people like Facebook censoring you from posting this kind of thing. You are going to be free to post this stuff. It's not going to be censored. This is where we're going to be able to view the information that Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and other platforms have, prevented us from showing. So, again, great work to Mari. A lot of people are starting to sign up. We're getting more and more people that are starting to interact with each other and share like this is the usual Facebook stuff. So,
yeah, if I see people using it, I'll feel a little bit more comfortable upgrading our hosting service. Our hosting provider is really bugging me about upgrading our service, but they want like $70 a month for it, and I'm very hesitant to do that. I just don't. We don't make any money off of this, so if I see people using it, it'll be worth it. It'll be more worth it to me because I can watch it grow and I can see it become something, but. Right now, I do apologize. When I post a rather large article on social media, the site does go down. We crashed the site like the Valentina Zarkova statement. Did I mention? Oh, I did mention that in the Solar Update. So that's another thing. Check out that Valentina Zarkova statement. She really does break down her detractors on that paper. And I'll just, we'll talk again. I've talked way too much tonight, Jake.
You're fine.
Sorry.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for us tonight, Thursday night. Thursday night. Jeez, it's getting late.
I'm all thrown out.
So, again, we'll do a 3 o'clock show on Sunday. We might do a show Saturday. That's still up in the air, but definitely 3 o'clock on Sunday where everyone from all over the world can hopefully tune in and check out our show at a normal time. So, until then, folks, take care, and we will talk soon.